Hello everyone, I'm Serena, welcome back to my channel, and as you can tell by the title, today we're doing a part 2 of my Victoria series because, so far I've only made one video about the show, which was a deep dive into the characters and things I only noticed as an adult rewatching the show that I hadn't noticed when I was younger, and that video did really well and got over 100,000 views, and there's still more to say about this show, which is really weird and I can't get over it because it's a kids show, so you wouldn't think there'd be a lot to say, but there is. So a topic I really wanted to talk about today, because I touched on it in the last video, is this idea of how the show romanticizes unhealthy, toxic, or even abusive relationships. And this is a problem with quite a few Nickelodeon shows for kids. I like looking at how these things can influence young, impressionable people and where we draw that line between reality and the media, and also how much the media can be blamed for our behavior, especially the behavior of preteens and teens. Obviously, some of the relationships in Victorious are healthier than others, but when it came to the relationships, the romantic relationships, that's often where stuff started to get a little bit icky. But I'm going to touch on the main couples of the show. And I thought I'd start with the main relationship, Jade and her boyfriend, Beck. They really divided viewers because although there are loads of people who love them as a couple, often when people got older and rewatched their scenes, they realized that they didn't actually like them much as a couple. And it's funny because I watched this show when I was like 12, and not once did I think that Jade and Beck were a couple I wanted to strive to be like. I always was very confused as to why they were even together, because they didn't even seem to enjoy each other's company, and I was really disappointed when they ended up staying together because I truly wanted them to go different, separate ways, and I thought they were so much more likable when they weren't in scenes together, which is pretty ironic.
I don't care! I'm not happy with our relationship!
People tend to put Jade up on a pedestal and say, gosh, she's so edgy and iconic and funny. And she is those things. She's an entertaining character for sure. The show wouldn't be the same without her. There's a lot of things in the show that are darker, that are made humorous, that I found funny. But Jade constantly belittling Beck and them bickering all the time was never something I found funny. I always found it actually quite irritating. She's really unkind and she's always snapping at him and raising her voice when the arguments barely even become an argument. And in the locked up episodes, we found out that Beck's family doesn't like Jade and they don't want to spend time with her, which in the long run could cause a lot of problems, because ideally, especially if you like your family, you would want them to like your girlfriend. With Jade and Beck's relationship, although Beck seems to like Jade, I always felt like she was way more into him than he was into her. Sure, he enjoyed having a relationship with her, but I think he would have been happy to let it go and explore other options, and that's why she was clinging so hard onto him, because she is very jealous by nature. She is very insecure, and her whole tough woman act is just that, an act, and she knows that he's not as committed to her as maybe she wants him to be, which would explain why sometimes Beck jokes about girls liking him or him hanging out with girls or whatever, because he kind of secretly wants to do that. I know that once Jade threw a rock at Beck because he was hanging out with someone of the opposite gender. Jade was also really jealous of Tori because she felt like Tori was a threat to her in more ways than one. But then she was taking out her anger at Tori on Beck. It triggered her to think that maybe Beck would like Tori, so she started being mean to both Beck and Tori. Beck and Jade have admitted they fight a lot, and Jade said that she thought it was normal for couples to fight all the time, so clearly she's had some questionable relationship modeling. There are a few points in the series where they have a cute, fun exchange, but most of the time it was honestly pretty bitchy and unpleasant. Sometimes Beck would criticize something Jade did, and then Jade would jump to, oh, so you're calling me ugly? Oh, so you want to break up then, I see, which is never what he said. She was looking for a reason for things to go badly, even when things were fine. And honestly, it just reminds me of this social experiment I watched when I was younger, where this pretend couple goes out in public, and then the girl starts slapping the guy and speaking really horribly to him, pushing him around, and no one does anything. In fact, a few people laugh or think it's a joke. We've got this double standard when it comes to women being abusers. I also think that because Jade is attractive, people don't want to call her out, and obviously she's quite charming and the actress plays her really well, so people are very quick to play down what she does. I thought Jade was funny, and I like sometimes that her meanness is made into a joke, but at other points I thought it was a bit weird how people idolized her, considering she's not a very nice person. I mean, is she a well-written character? Yes, but I think it's odd when people say they want to be like her or they look up to her. I wouldn't want to be friends with someone like that. She's really annoying. And Beck even makes a comment like, easy is boring, I like a girl who fights back, which by the way makes no sense. And that's where my problem came in, is I was hoping that the show would make a commentary about abusive relationships, about the problems with dating someone who's not good for you, and then they would have the couple split up, not get back together, and then date other people, and it would teach them something. But instead, comments like easy is boring is literally romanticizing this very unhealthy relationship, whilst perpetuating this harmful idea that having a stable, loving, passionate, kind relationship is dull or too difficult or unrealistic, and that things need to be filled with drama and fights to be normal. And that's just, oh, that's not true. And I could never understand why they kept getting back together, because they were so unhappy, and I genuinely wanted them to stay apart so it would teach the kids watching the show something useful about leaving situations that don't serve you, about finding someone who brings out the better parts of you. But when Beck and Jade don't do that, it's like the show is playing into the toxicity of it and wanting you to root for a couple that I just never liked. Beck sometimes wasn't very kind to Jade, and I understand why, but he was pretty patronizing towards her sometimes, and he never made it particularly clear to those girls who were flirting with him that he wasn't available and he wasn't setting those boundaries, which is douchey. And I still remember that one episode where they were all going over to Sikowitz's house to play dress up and do acting and stay in character, and then while in character Jade really badly burned her hand, and I thought that Beck would come over because he's her boyfriend and try and look after her, but he doesn't even react. He just doesn't care.
Wait, that tray just... the oven.
My goodness, that tray was hot! Well, look at there! My skin's starting to blister!
Jade, perhaps I should drive...
Jade! My name is Betty Sue Goldenheart, a happy farm girl who's experiencing extreme pain right now.
And I know he needs to stay in character, but he can come over and look after her and do it in character, because he was playing someone that had privacy issues, no boundaries, so it would be very easy for him to go up and like touch her, especially because he was constantly touching people's face and pushing past their personal bubble. It would make sense for him to go and grab her hand and try and look after her. But yeah, he was not very considerate.
Why are you in a bad mood?
Maybe because you didn't call me till 2 in the afternoon on my birthday.
That was 7 months ago.
Yeah, but you never explained to me. I don't understand.
When him and Jade weren't together and he was flirting with Tori and making a move, and then Tori said she didn't want to be with him, it felt like pretty soon after that he got back together with Jade, not because he wanted to, but because he wanted to be with someone and Tori had rejected him, so Jade was his backup, because I doubt he would have wanted to go back to Jade if Tori had actually wanted him. Beck is the one person who has some level of control over Jade compared to other people who are scared shitless of her, because Beck isn't scared of Jade, and that's quite an interesting dynamic because everyone else is. And sometimes he does actually get her to shut up, like in the episode Begging on Your Knees. She was being annoying, so he told her to have a timeout and sit in the corner, and she did listen to him. But who wants to be in a relationship where you tell your partner, oh, that's a timeout, and they're like, oh, okay. That's bloody weird. She's not a dog. What's odd though, and it always really bothered me, is that Jade and Beck came across as so much more of a cute, normal couple when they weren't in public. Behind the scenes videos I hadn't seen, or extended clips, or videos from the slap that I'd missed, where they're being like a cute, normal couple. They're just having a play fight and he's ruffling her hair. The minute they're away from the general hustle and bustle of school, then they're lovey-dovey, but then it's like this show in public. Are they both really attention attention-seeking and they like the attention of people watching them argue? I don't know, but that's also so weird to me. I also sensed some codependency though in their relationship that was a little weird. We know Jade was a mess when they broke up. She'd been in floods of tears and wouldn't know what to do and would just want to get him back. But Beck never seemed quite as bothered. He was more like, yeah, we needed to break up, I'm done with her. He was less emotional about it, at least from what we could see. But when they were together, I remember the fact that it didn't seem like they were doing much if they weren't together, and they didn't really have lives outside of each other, because when Beck was in Canada, Jade said that she had nothing to do while he was away. You know what's interesting too, and I know some people may have forgotten about this, is Tori and Beck, because Tori was never really friends with Jade, so it wouldn't have been a complete disaster for her to date Beck. But there was always this instant chemistry and interest there between Tori and Beck from the beginning.
I'm so sorry.
Stop saying that.
1, 2. Don't let me get to 3.
Obviously he was in a relationship at the time, so the way they started getting to know each other was a bit weird, but I always felt like it was right person, wrong time. They could have been very happy together if maybe they'd met at a different point when he was single. However, when they first met, the whole pilot episode really is a bit of an icky start to their relationship, because his girlfriend Jade immediately starts being mean to Tori because she's jealous of her, and then Tori is doing an improv exercise with Beck, and as part of it she asks him to kiss her, and rather than him saying no, which would have been pretty easy, he says, oh, let's do it, and they kiss in front of Jade. So no wonder Jade has issues with feeling like her boyfriend isn't loyal to her. I mean, really, it wouldn't have been hard for him to find a way to say no, and Tori should have known better than to ask him that, because it just seems very petty. It felt like at the beginning of the show they were seriously considering having Beck and Tori be endgame, but then they were surprised by how many people actually really liked Beck and Jade together and wanted them to stay together. When Tori and Beck first meet, she spills coffee all over him and it's a bit of a meet cute. Later in a stage fighting class, she comes in late, so she sees Beck being attacked and doesn't realize it's stage fighting, so she freaks out and gets super protective and tries to run over to help, and it's such a sweet moment and shows that she cares about him. And Jade afterwards gets all petty and she's like, why do you care if my boyfriend's getting beat up? Why were you trying to help him? And the way it's filmed is framed almost for us to feel bad for Tori and want her to get with Beck, just because we're also resentful towards Jade and we don't care about what happens to her. At least for me, because I didn't like Jade very much at that point, I wouldn't even have cared. There was all this attention on Tori and Beck in the beginning, but then nothing ends up happening between them. They're just friends, and there are a few moments where there's chemistry there, but nothing's actually happening. I mean, the amount of times they hugged and they had this really intimate hug, and then she like wrapped her legs around him, and then they carried on as if nothing happened, and I was like, this is so weird. And then the one time he does actually try to make a move on her, Tori feels too guilty and she's like, look, I can't do this because of Jade, and I know we're not friends, but we're kind of friends, aren't we? So I don't feel comfortable being with you, which by the way is ridiculous, because Jade had been bullying her non-stop. You don't owe Jade anything. You don't owe her your friendship. You're not even friends. I really appreciated Tori's growth and that she didn't want to feel like she was taking someone else's ex or whatever, but I don't think the rules apply in the same way when Jade's been kind of a bitch to you ever since you arrived. At least that's how I felt in my books. It also encourages us to feel bad for Jade, like, oh, poor thing, she's going to potentially lose her ex-boyfriend for good. And I was like, I don't care. I wanted her to lose Beck. I didn't feel bad for her at the thought of Beck moving on. I wanted him to move on. And I thought that Beck and Tori could have been so much better together. I'll never forget that time that she was too scared to do the stunt, and so he dressed up as her to do the stunt for her so she wouldn't need to do it. And I thought that was so sweet, and it just made me realize how he treated Tori more like a girlfriend than he ever treated his actual girlfriend. I would have been happy if Tori had ended up with Beck, or if she actually ended up with Andre. In fact, that may have been the better option, because Andre was always there for her. He was always so sweet, always reliable. He never left her side, and they had such a cute relationship.
Why don't you take a little break?
No, I gotta find the S. I don't want to be Trina's assistant anymore. I just need the S to spell Kesha. Where is the S?
I don't know, baby. I I just don't know.
And I think it would have been really sweet to see their friendship evolve into something more organically over time, because I didn't know how common this was, but I know a lot of people, a lot of my female friends, who said that they really liked the idea of just being friends with someone at first and then it evolving into a relationship later, because you've already got that trust there and you're comfortable with the person. I'm mixed about this because I do love a good platonic friendship, but at the same time, I don't know, I felt like it was a bit odd how he was always there in the background but nothing was ever happening between them. A lot of people ship Jade and Tori, even though Jade was bullying Tori, and I think that's a really interesting theory because they did have a lot of chemistry together on screen.
Give it back.
Sure. Yeah. And now we're in a closet.
I could sort of get why people would like it, but I'm not sure if I love the idea of this. I go back and forth between how I feel about it, but I don't like the idea of two people dating where one of them bullied the other. That's a really big trope in any kind of gay relationship where one of them's bullying the other and then it turns into love and they were bullying the other person because of internalized homophobia or whatever. We've seen that so many times. I think it gets a bit old, so that's why I wouldn't have loved this, at least from my point of view. When Jade was bullying Tori and picking on her and making snide remarks about her voice and how snobby she thinks Tori is or whatever, it didn't seem to me like it was disguising some sort of secret attraction. It just felt like she was jealous. She thought Tori was prettier than her, more talented, the sort of girl that Beck would want, and she constantly feels the need to compete with other women, and I don't like that. I think that's very unattractive, and that really was all there was to it. I never got any vibes that she actually wanted a relationship with Tori or that she secretly wanted to date her, and I only started feeling like that a bit later on in the show when they were having a few weirdly flirty moments. I like that they became closer over time and they did start to relate to each other in a healthier way, but even so there were still some snide remarks coming from Jade and a certain reluctance and bitterness Jade had about the thought of being friends with Tori, and I just don't think that's on. I don't think that's necessary, and so I don't love that. If you're going to have Tori and Jade flirt, then you need to commit to it and actually have them be a couple, but it's like the show didn't want to commit to it, so they were skimming around the edges of it and tiptoeing around it, but they knew exactly what was happening and they didn't want to acknowledge it, because if you're going to not have them get together, then just don't put those scenes in the first place, because it's giving people false hope and excitement over a relationship that might not end up happening. In a lot of Dan Schneider's shows, he often chooses to pair up characters who hate each other at first and then grow to love each other. Like Sam and Freddie from iCarly don't like each other for ages, Logan and Quinn from Zoe 101, Josh and Mindy from Drake and Josh. This dynamic is something that Tori and Jade fit perfectly into, and they do sometimes have some weirdly flirty moments, and at one point in the play they even play husband and wife, but yet it never ends up evolving into anything. Other couples we have in the show who aren't very good role models are actually Tori's parents, because they're adults, so you would think that maybe their relationship would be a bit better because they were older and at least they would be good role models, but they actually have the worst relationship. It's up there with Jade and Beck. It's a really bad relationship because it's strongly implied that Tori's mum is actually cheating on her dad with this policeman, and the mum doesn't even seem to care about it. She's blatantly flirting with him in front of Tori and stuff. It's really awkward. We also have the couple of Cat and Robbie. I'm not going to talk too much about those two because I think I've already spoken a lot about it in my first video, but when I was younger, I thought they had some genuinely cute moments, like in that episode which resembled The Breakfast Club, where she starts crawling on the table towards him and bumps his nose or something. That was so weird, but very funny. And they have a few genuinely sweet moments where she's upset or something and he comforts her, or when they try and look after each other. And even their first kiss was quite a sweet moment. So they're not the worst, but they had so many other moments that were genuinely creepy that I just can't get past it. She kissed him to prove to him that sometimes acting is just acting, and then he was saying, "Oh, I want you to meet my parents," and she was like, "No, that was just a stage kiss. What are you talking about?" And in general, his creepy behavior with other women, even getting angry when girls don't return his affection, so he goes and tries to hurt them through his puppet, pretending his puppet did it, but he literally did it. And in general, he's quite a disturbed young man. Even though Kat obviously has her issues, she can actually be overall a very sweet, loving person. It is suspicious to me that Dan Schneider would try and pair someone like Robbie with Cat, because Robbie is this, I mean, he's a bit of a loser. Whenever he did something nasty, he would do it through the puppet, and I don't know how you'd get through to him. And let's say he did something wrong, she'd try to talk to him about it, and I could imagine him being like, oh no, my puppet did that, and it would make it really difficult to resolve arguments. So I'm not saying they couldn't do it, they could, but it wouldn't be that easy. And there are strong hints that he's done stuff Kat isn't comfortable with before, and so she's a bit scared of him sometimes. And all those things combined made me go, why would this lovely girl want to go out with someone like Robbie? Why would that appeal to her in the slightest? It wouldn't.
Brought him from home?
Why do you have...
I'm a tutor and I don't like to talk about things I do at my house.
It seems like a male fantasy. It reminds me of a lot of these Adam Sandler movies where this average, boring, annoying, cringy guy ends up somehow managing to go out with all these beautiful, funny, sweet, down-to-earth women, and he does that every time, and I'm like, it's a little bit unrealistic. I don't know how often that would happen in real life. I'm not saying that Kat and Robbie are a bad couple, by the way. They would be fine, but I just want to point out that people tend to say, oh, they're so cute, and they are one of the more popular couples in the show, but I never found them particularly cute. I genuinely think Kat could raise the bar a bit. And people tend to overlook Robbie's creepy sides because it's played as comedy on the show, but I don't like a guy's creepy behavior being made into comedy, because that almost means that the show isn't taking it seriously and treating it like an issue, because they're making light of it. If I'm talking about Victorious, I have to point to other Nickelodeon shows that had Dan Schneider working there as a writer or being involved in the show in general, because you can't mention Victorious without these other shows, because it needs to be put into context. If you had only seen Victorious, you might think, oh, that was a one-off, that was a fluke, they were still finding their feet. I'm sure the other shows are fine and have lots of great role models, loads of healthy relationships, but no, not really, because I watched Sam and Cat, I watched all of that, and I've seen quite a few episodes of Icarly. What I'm seeing makes me feel a bit concerned because of the vast majority of these relationships being unhealthy and weird, and normally I'd be like, well, it doesn't matter, it's for entertainment purposes, who cares? But it's targeted towards children and preteens, and very young people are watching these shows, and that's what rubs me the wrong way, because kids don't know how to distinguish sometimes between what they're watching and what happens in real life. And sometimes what they see in shows is their only modeling of what relationships are like, especially if their parents don't talk to them about what constitutes a healthy relationship. If they don't have those talks and they haven't had relationships themselves, right, they don't have that experience, then they can only see relationships through the lens of what they've been taught. And if all they're seeing is shows like Victorious with some very questionable relationship dynamics, then I'm sure it would influence the way that kids think is appropriate and normal in relationships, especially when it's played for laugh. The topics aren't dealt with or addressed properly, they're just swept under the rug and made into a joke. For instance, in iCarly, you have Sam and Freddie. They are a couple in the show at one point. Sam spent years being absolutely horrible to Freddie and verbally abusing him or making fun of him.
Don't want to try it?
No, Sam, wait for me, no.
You keep half these kids down.
Here, Sam, you here. And I want you to pretend Freddie's a guy you have a crush on. I'll check his pulse.
Even when they were dating and when they were realizing they were attracted to each other, sure, there was some chemistry there, but even when they were on a date, bickering, and Carly had to come over and say, guys, if you're going to argue this much, then maybe you shouldn't be a couple at all. They were the worst couple in that whole show. They never should have become a thing. And the weird thing to me is how many people like them as a couple, because it's not normal for you to be fighting so much. Before they were dating, Sam would hit him frequently, and it wasn't in a jokey way. She just was aggressive towards him. And when Freddie got mad about things like her sabotaging his chance to get to college and doing really nasty things, then it was made out that he needed to apologize. Every character on a Dan Schneider show tends to have one personality trait that's really exaggerated and made really comic book big for laughs. For instance, Sam being aggressive, or Jade West and Victorious being terrifying. So they have certain traits that are played up, which is fine, but I just thought that Sam was being too mean to Freddie, and where do you draw the line? You need to draw it somewhere. Sam and Cat is a spin-off a combination of both Victorious and Icarly, because it has one actor from each show, which is obviously Sam and Cat. And the two girls are friends who don't really seem to like each other that much, but apparently they're friends, they're kind of friends, and they run this babysitting business together, and they're terrible and neglectful towards the kids, and I don't know who would hire them. They're awful. As much as I quite enjoyed that show, when I was younger at least, I do think that it has to be noted there are just no relationships in that one at all, which is maybe why it's less uncomfortable to watch, because you don't really see the girls dating and the storylines are centered around other things. But that in itself I found weird, because I know it's probably just due to actors going and doing different projects, but we know that Kat had this thing going on with Robbie, but we're never seeing him in the episodes, aside from maybe once when he appeared as a guest star. And we know that Sam had a thing with Freddie, but he's not appearing regularly in these episodes.
Robbie Shapiro! Oh, Kat, you're back. Robbie was just singing me a little song he wrote called...
I know what it's called. He wrote that song for me. He sang that to me over a year ago.
Well, he's singing it to me now.
I thought you and me had something special.
Well, it seems like you've got something special with a lot of fellas.
And I was hoping that both the girls would realize their previous relationships weren't working. I was hoping Kat would completely cut off the flirtationship with Robbie and maybe mention something to Sam like, you know what, it's time for a change. I used to like this guy Robbie, but I don't think he's good for me. I know you don't need romantic subplots, but somehow in Sam and Kat I always felt that the absence of it was weird, because it felt like something was missing. It would just be nice to see the characters grow and be like, you know what, that relationship isn't serving me anymore. I'm going to go and find someone else. And that was my biggest problem overall, especially with Victorious, is this idea that the characters were trapped in their bubble. And it would have been cooler to see someone actually let go of a significant relationship, move on and try something different and experiment with something healthier. For instance, I definitely think that Jade and Beck should have ended the relationship. And maybe it sounds like I'm taking this really seriously and overanalyzing this literal children's show, but these things we're seeing on screen do influence us, especially if we didn't have parents to teach us about certain things and we are young and our ideas of what a relationship is are still developing. Then it would be nice to have more shows actually present some fun, healthy relationships, because when I look at shows like Victorious or Icarly as a whole, I really struggle to find relationships that aren't toxic. And then characters like Andre, who are unproblematic, who are sweet, don't have a significant relationship, so we don't get to see a nice healthy relationship play out. I mean, Andre never had like a long-term girlfriend throughout the series. He had a few little short-lived things, but that was kind of a shame too, because I wanted to see someone like Andre, who deserved a good relationship, be happy with someone, but we didn't. So those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think, and make sure you subscribe, because I've got some very exciting videos coming up, and I will see you guys for the next one.